You touched on this last week when you were there, but I'm curious, as this week unfolded, did Trump's demeanor change when he was in the courtroom versus when he was in front of the cameras?
Absolutely. Trump in the courtroom, he's, although he is expressive in certain ways, throwing his hands up at different points. At one point he had to testify, of course. But he's a relatively quiet presence. I mean, elephant in the room couldn't fit better for this moment. Everyone's watching him, but his role is sitting and watching everyone else, watching the witnesses testify, watching his lawyers do what they do. When he walks outside of that courtroom, he's the star. I mean, literally, when the doors open, it's like a nightclub. Just bulbs flashing everywhere. Boom, 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 boom. Trump walks out. People screaming questions. And he'll sort of, gather himself and then boom, into whatever responses he's going to give or whatever statement he's going to give. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long. But there's no question that, yes, everybody's eyes are on him in the courtroom, but he's not the star. Once he steps out, he's the star.
Based on what you've seen, based on what you've witnessed in court, as we all know, Trump is far and away the front runner in 2024. Some polls even have him beating President Biden. Based on what you saw, based on his legal troubles, do you think that this will have any impact on 2024?
Certainly it'll have impact. Anything that's a major case like this is going to have impact. Now, does that mean that Donald Trump's not going to win the Republican nomination? No, I don't think so. If you're saying impact is it going to have a determinative effect on either the Republican primary or the general election? I'm skeptical of that. I think that at this point, people understand Trump has serious legal issues, and people who support him generally support him despite those. People who don't aren't going to be, shocked that he's in legal trouble. But that being said, elections are close affairs often, and swings of a half a percentage point do matter. And will this case, along with the criminal cases that he's facing, ultimately hurt him in the general election? We'll find out, but it's hard to imagine that it doesn't turn at least a few votes.
I do now want to pivot to your most recent piece for Forbes. I'm going to read you a passage from it, and then if we could dive into it. You wrote this: Deutsche Bank believed Trump's profits at one property were nearly triple the amount listed on an income statement. Does the discrepancy reflect accounting inconsistencies or something more sinister? Dan, to start off, why is the math not mathing here?
So basically, what we got to see is some of the documents that were coming out in this case were Deutsche Bank credit reports. This is their understanding of who their client was and what his financial situation was. If you go through those reports, one of the shocking things is how many things they have wrong, just blatant inaccuracies. Number of stories on a floor, square footage of a building, but perhaps most importantly, the profitability of certain properties. Now, what we did is we took what Deutsche Bank's understanding was of the profitability of certain properties, and then we compared it to other documents. So, for instance, the Trump National Doral in Miami. This is a golf resort in Miami. So we had filed a Freedom of Information request to get some financial information from local authorities in Miami. And as part of that request, we received income statements that the Trump organization had filed in concert with a property tax appeal that it was making in Miami. If you put the income statement that the Trump organization filed as part of that property tax appeal up against the income statement that Deutsche Bank believed for the same property over the same time periods, you see enormous discrepancies. So then the question becomes, okay, well, what's causing these discrepancies? And, I contacted the Trump organization. They listed a couple of things that may have been listed on one of the documents and not on the others. Ultimately, though, that still didn't make the math work. The discrepancy was too big, even if you included all of those things and were generous about it and said, okay, every single year, the maximum amount we're going to attribute over here, it still didn't add up. At the very least, when you look at these two documents, you see bad accounting, inconsistent practices, numbers that just don't make sense even within the same document. And at the worst, you have to wonder, are those discrepancies between the documents the result of something more nefarious? In other words, that they were intentionally deceiving their lender or the tax authorities.